The morning I found out I was worth $3.2 million, I was sitting in a hospital break room in my scrubs, eating a sad desk lunch of leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. My phone buzzed with an email from a law firm in Charlotte I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Estate of Harold Whitmore. Urgent. Beneficiary notification. I almost deleted it. I thought it was spam. I almost kept eating my pasta and went back to a 12-hour shift and never knew. My grandfather, Papa Harold, my mother's father, had passed away 6 weeks earlier. I found out from a cousin's Facebook post because my mother didn't bother to call me. That should tell you everything you need to know about my family. I called the number in the email on my next break, standing outside the hospital near the ambulance bay because it was the only place quiet enough to hear. The attorney, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Ellison, explained that Papa Harold had left a revised will. Revised quietly, 2 years before he died, without telling anyone. He had left his house in Charlotte, his investment accounts, and his ownership stake in a small regional trucking company entirely to me, his only grandchild who, in his words quoted directly from the document, showed up when it mattered without being asked. $3.2 million and a house and a business. I had to sit down on the curb next to a dumpster because my legs stopped working. Let me tell you about my family so you understand what happened next. My mother's name is Renata. She's the kind of woman who has an answer for everything and takes credit for things she had nothing to do with. When I got into the nursing program, she told her friends she pushed me toward healthcare. She had actively discouraged me from applying. She said the hours were terrible and I wasn't organized enough. But at her book club, suddenly she was the architect of my success. My aunt, my mother's younger sister Celeste, is somehow worse. Celeste married into money in her 30s, which gave her a permanent air of authority she had done nothing to earn. She lives 40 minutes from Charlotte in a house with a 3-car garage and a landscaped front lawn she talks about constantly. She treated Papa Harold like a financial asset she was patiently waiting to collect on. She visited him twice a year, always around his birthday and always right before the holidays, and she called those visits being devoted. My cousin Spencer is Celeste's son. He's 31, has never held a job for longer than 8 months, and refers to himself as an entrepreneur. His most recent venture was a supplement brand that lasted about 4 months before the website went dark. Before that, it was a food truck, a drop shipping business, and something involving cryptocurrency that he stopped mentioning abruptly last Thanksgiving. Spencer was the golden grandchild, the one my grandfather was supposedly going to set up. That was the unspoken family agreement. Papa Harold's estate would flow to Celeste, and through her to Spencer, who needed it, who deserved a head start. Nobody asked Papa Harold what he thought about any of this. I had been driving to Charlotte every few weeks for the last 4 years of my grandfather's life, not for money, not because anyone asked me to, because he was lonely and he was slowing down and he liked having someone sit with him and watch old westerns on television and eat the pimento cheese sandwiches he still insisted on making himself even when his hands shook. I changed the battery in his smoke detector. I drove him to his cardiologist twice when his regular driver canceled. One winter, I stayed 3 days straight when he had pneumonia and was too proud to go to the hospital. My mother knew I made those trips. She called it sweet, in the tone people use when they mean unnecessary. Celeste knew too. She told me once that I was enabling his independence when he should be considering assisted living. What she meant was that my presence made it easier for him to stay in his house, which delayed whatever financial rearrangements she had been imagining. After Mr. Ellison explained everything on that phone call, he told me there would likely be challenges. Papa Harold had anticipated this. He had documented everything carefully. He'd also left a handwritten letter for me, separate from the legal will, that Mr. Retent, Ellison read aloud in a steady voice while I sat on that curb next to the dumpster and cried so hard a paramedic walking by stopped to ask if I needed help. Papa Harold wrote that he knew I never came for what he had. He wrote that was exactly why he wanted me to have it. I flew to Charlotte that weekend to meet with Mr. Ellison in person and begin the process of understanding what I had just inherited. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I needed a few days to think. I needed to understand the business, the accounts, the house, all of it before I could figure out what I was going to do. I had 4 days. On the 5th day, my mother called. She didn't open with hello. She opened with, "I heard you were in Charlotte." I don't know how she found out. Someone saw my car, or someone at the law firm was connected to someone, or the small gravitational pull of money just works like that. It sends a signal and the right people pick it up. She told me Papa Harold had always meant to divide things equally. She said there must have been some kind of mistake, or that someone had influenced him in his final years when he wasn't fully himself. She said this in a very careful, sad voice, like she was concerned for his memory and not at all concerned for the money. I told her I would call her back. I didn't. 2 days later, Celeste called. Her tone was different, less sad, more focused. She said she had spoken to her own attorney and that contesting a will in North Carolina was very standard, very common, and that she just wanted me to know she wasn't doing this out of anger. She was doing it because she felt obligated to honor what Harold truly intended. She said it would be easier and cheaper for everyone if we could reach a private agreement. She used the phrase, "keep it in the family," 3 times in 7 minutes. I counted. Spencer texted me the same afternoon. He didn't call, he texted, which told me everything about how much courage he had. The text said, "Hey cuz, heard about the situation. Kinda crazy, right? My mom's really upset. I think we all just need to talk. I know things have been weird between us, but family should stick together, especially now. Let me know if you want to grab lunch." I read that text 4 times. Family should stick together. This from a person who forgot to invite me to his college graduation because his mother said the venue was at capacity. This from a family that did not call me when my grandfather was in the hospital 18 months ago, because as my mother explained after the fact, they didn't want to worry me. I did not reply to the text. What happened next came fast. Celeste filed a formal challenge to the will within 3 weeks, claiming undue influence, the legal argument that someone had manipulated Papa Harold into changing his wishes when he was vulnerable. The someone, in their version, was me. The same me who had been quietly driving to Charlotte and changing smoke detector batteries and watching westerns. According to their story, I had used those visits to isolate him and pressure him. I had kept every text message I ever sent my grandfather. I had receipts from every gas station on the I-85 corridor. I had photos of us together with timestamps. I had a voicemail from him from 4 months before he died where he told me, in his own voice, that he had talked to his attorney and that he felt good about what he had decided and that he hoped I wouldn't feel guilty because I had earned it and he was proud of me. I gave all of it to Mr. Ellison. I also did something I hadn't planned on doing. I hired my own attorney, a woman named Jody who had 15 years of estate litigation experience and who, when I explained the situation in her conference room, put her pen down and said, "They don't have a case, but let's make sure they know that." The challenge process was brutal in the way that only family conflict can be. My mother sent me a handwritten letter, 2 pages, explaining that she had sacrificed so much for me and that my behavior was a betrayal of everything she had given. She listed specific things she felt she deserved credit for. My childhood bedroom, a winter coat she bought me when I was 9, the time she attended my high school graduation, even though it was a long drive. I read the letter once. Then I put it in a manila folder and gave it to Jody because she had asked me to document all contact. Celeste escalated. She reached out to distant relatives with her version of events. She called Papa Harold's next-door neighbor, a retired school teacher who had known our family for 30 years, and tried to get him to say he had noticed something off about my visits. He called me directly afterward, confused and upset, and told me what Celeste had said. He also told me that my grandfather had spoken about me often, and always warmly, and that he had always seemed clear-headed and happy when I visited. He agreed to speak with Jody. Spencer, meanwhile, started posting on social media about the importance of family loyalty and the cruelty of people who take advantage of the elderly. He never mentioned me by name. He didn't have to. Enough of our mutual contacts figured it out and started sending me screenshots. I took a week off from my nursing job. I sat in my apartment in Raleigh with the blinds half closed and went through everything. Every document, every message, every memory of every visit to Charlotte. I cried twice, not out of guilt, but out of something harder to name. The grief of watching people you wanted to believe in reveal exactly who they were. Because some part of me had always hoped my mother would surprise me. Some part of me had held on to the idea that under the performance of competition and credit claiming, she actually loved me in the straightforward way I had needed her to. The will challenge was dismissed 4 months later. The judge found no credible evidence of undue influence. Papa Harold's documentation was thorough, and his revisions had been made when he was, as multiple medical records confirmed, entirely competent. Jody was calm about it in the way of someone who had expected this outcome. I sat in the parking lot outside the courthouse and called my grandfather's neighbor to thank him. He told me Papa Harold would have been glad. I believed him. I quit my nursing job the following month, not impulsively. I gave 8 weeks' notice, trained my replacement, said proper goodbyes. I had been good at that job and I had loved parts of it, but I had also been running on empty for years in a way I hadn't let myself fully acknowledge. I took 3 months and did nothing except slowly learn what I had inherited. The trucking company was small, 12 trucks, regional contracts, a general manager named Felix who had worked there for 11 years and who met me in Papa Harold's old office on my first official visit and shook my hand and said, "He talked about you. Said you were sharp and you'd figure it out." I almost cried again. I held it together. Barely. The house needed work, but it had good bones. Papa Harold's words, actually. He had said it to me once while we were sitting on the back porch, and I had thought he meant the house, but maybe he meant something else. I moved to Charlotte. I had no particular attachment to Raleigh anymore, and the house was there, and Felix needed someone present, not managing remotely while processing grief in a lawsuit. I hired a contractor for the repairs. I kept the porch exactly as it was. My mother reached out 3 months after the case was dismissed. A phone call this time. Her voice had changed, softer, more careful, with long pauses that were designed to feel like emotion. She said she had been doing a lot of reflecting. She said she realized that her grief over Papa Harold had caused her to act in ways she wasn't proud of. She said she missed me and that she hoped we could find our way back to each other. I listened to the whole thing. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I told her I needed more time. I told her that what she had done, not just the legal challenge but the letter, the campaign through the extended family, all of it, had been a real harm, not a misunderstanding. I told her I wasn't interested in pretending that the last year hadn't happened. She started to say something about how she had only done what she felt was right, and I said, "I know. That's the part I'm still sitting with." Then I said goodbye and hung up. Celeste has not contacted me directly since the dismissal. Through mutual family members, I've heard that she believes I manipulated the legal system, which is a creative interpretation of what happened. Spencer Supplement Company has a new name now and a new website. I know this because he has not blocked me on Instagram, and occasionally I see it in my suggested posts. The algorithm's still insisting we might have something in common. I don't hate them. That is the honest truth and not a performance of grace. Hate takes energy I don't have and attention I'd rather spend elsewhere. What I feel is something closer to clarity. Like the image finally came into focus, and now I can see the shapes for what they are and stop wondering if I was wrong about them. Here's what I know now that I didn't know 3 years ago. Papa Harold saw me clearly. That matters more than I can explain. 32 years of being in a family where you're treated like a background character, where your choices are sweet or enabling or unnecessary, and then one document, one handwritten letter, one old man who paid attention. And the whole story you've been telling yourself about your own worth has to be rewritten. The trucking company turned a real profit last year. Felix is still the general manager, and we have a good working relationship built on mutual respect and a shared appreciation for Papa Harold's old office, which still has its coffee mug on the windowsill because neither of us has moved it. I expanded to 2 new regional contracts. I hired a second dispatcher. I am learning things every week that I didn't know I was capable of learning. The house is good. The porch is good. I have a neighbor who stops by sometimes and we drink coffee, and he tells me stories about Papa Harold from before I was born, the younger version, the one who drove his own truck and worked 18-hour days and never thought he'd amount to much. I think about that version of him often, the one who didn't know yet what he was building. People ask me sometimes if I ever feel guilty. Guilty that Celeste and Spencer didn't get what they expected. Guilty that my mother and I are still not speaking, really, in any meaningful way. And I understand the question, because I used to ask it myself, lying awake at 2 in the morning with the legal bills and the discovery documents spread across my kitchen table. But here is the thing about guilt. Guilt is appropriate when you have done something wrong. I drove to Charlotte every few weeks for 4 years. I sat with a lonely old man and watched westerns and ate pimento cheese sandwiches. I was present, consistently, without expecting anything in return. I did not do those things to inherit anything. I did them because he was my grandfather and he was alone and I loved him. That is not something to feel guilty about. That is just love, doing what love is supposed to do. What my family never understood is that presence is a choice you make over and over again, in small, ordinary moments that don't feel significant until they accumulate into something that is. Every trip to Charlotte, every voicemail, every afternoon on the porch. Those were not strategies. They were just me showing up. And sometimes, showing up is the whole story. If there is someone in your life who sees you clearly, who knows what you do when no one is watching and values it, hold on to that. Those people are rarer than money and worth more than any inheritance. And if you have ever been the one who showed up quietly, consistently, without credit or recognition, I want you to know that it counts. It always counted, even when no one acknowledged it. Even when the people who should have seen it looked right through you. Your presence has value. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Have you ever shown up for someone in your family the way no one showed up for you? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this resonated with you, subscribe and stick around. We tell real stories here, the kind that remind you that you are not alone and that the life you are quietly building matters more than you know. I still think about Papa Harold's coffee mug on the windowsill. Felix and I have never moved it. I don't think either of us ever will. There's something I've learned about how life actually works, not in a magical or religious sense, but in the plain, observable way that choices compound over time. Every trip I made down I-85, every afternoon on that back porch, every voicemail I saved without knowing why, none of those things felt significant in the moment. They felt like just showing up, but they were quietly building something, the way a foundation gets laid brick by brick before anyone sees the shape of the house. And on the other side of that equation, every time Celeste visited twice a year and called it devotion, that was building something too. Every time my mother took credit for things she didn't do, every time Spencer waited for a hand that was already reaching toward him, those choices were accumulating just as surely as mine were. The outcome wasn't punishment. It was just the natural weight of what each of us had actually done, finally settling. I think about the kind of person Papa Harold was. He was not a sentimental man. He was a practical one. The kind who drove his own truck and worked before dawn and didn't say more than he meant. When he changed his will, he wasn't making a statement. He was simply being accurate. He looked at what was real and he named it. That kind of integrity, that commitment to seeing things as they actually are, rather than as you wish they were, I want to carry that forward. I try to run the business the way he ran his life, honestly, without pretense, with real attention to the people who actually show up. The legal fight taught me something about my own mind that I hadn't expected. There were moments during those 4 months when I genuinely questioned myself. When my mother's letter arrived with its list of grievances, something in me wanted to fold. Not because she was right, but because I had spent so many years being told that my perception was off, that I was too sensitive, that I misread things. That voice doesn't disappear overnight. What I had to develop, slowly and with effort, was the capacity to hold what I knew against what I was being told and trust the former. That is harder than it sounds when the people contradicting you are the ones who raised you. But I kept the receipts. I kept the voicemails. Not out of paranoia, I just never threw them away because they mattered to me. And when it counted, they told the truth. There is something in that worth naming. Clarity protects you. Paying attention protects you. Understanding what is actually happening, rather than what you hope is happening. That is not coldness. That is survival. And eventually it becomes the ground you build a real life on. The perseverance piece is quieter than people expect. It doesn't look like fighting. It looks like continuing, going back to Charlotte the next time after the last time, giving 8 weeks notice at a job that took a lot out of me, sitting in Felix's office and learning something I didn't know, making the call I didn't want to make, showing up again when it would have been easier not to. Papa Harold showed up for 30 years before anyone called it a trucking company. I think about that when the work gets hard. I don't have a tidy conclusion to offer. What I have is a house with good bones, a business I'm still learning, and the coffee mug I will not move, and the knowledge that the life I am living now was built from the same ordinary material as every other life. Choices, time, and the willingness to keep going even when no one was watching. That turns out to be enough.